Hey there everyone, and welcome back to the reactjs training. And let's get started again. And in this video we're going to build up the logic for our timer.js, and we do have some things in here as well. Now notice what I'm doing in here. Now this is something interesting. First of all, in the h2 tag I have just actually changed the title in here. I think that looks much good with the welcome to timer app built in react.js. That looks pretty nice. And also notice I'm passing in a prop in here, also known as properties, but I would like to call it as prop. Now this is what do I have in here. Now this is saying start, and notice it says date.now. Now let me quickly go in here and try to print that out. And in fact, just after the render, I would like to log this here. So this dot props dot start. So this is what I'm having in here, and save that. And I guess we need to do a reload there, and let's go to the inspect and console, and notice it just passing me a long number in here. And in case you are not aware of what this is actually, I would highly recommend you to go for the date part in the JavaScript, date, JavaScript, and MDN. So simply visit this guy, and I would highly recommend to clear up some of the JavaScript basics on the date in here. Date actually is a very detailed, and it can be used for quite a lot. And notice you should be aware of the syntax of what date now and what this is all about. So go ahead, it's a good time to read the documentation. You should make it in a habit, and I expect all of you might have gone through with this in your JavaScript training. So pretty easy, nothing big deal in here. And basically all we are doing in here is passing the date from the constructor in here, not the constructor actually, I'm sorry for that, from the properties in here. Okay, so that is good, and we have also verified quickly in here that that is being accessible in this child component as well. So let's just delete that, and that is a good sign for us. Okay, now let's try to make this a little bit modular app, and what we want to do is change this into dynamic something. So a good thing would be, let's define a clock in here, and obviously the clock will have a default state, and the good idea to define a default state would be constructor. So rcon for the constructor, and I would like to call my clock, and that is going to have a default value of, let's just say 0 for now. Okay, and in order to simply print the value, we have to remove this guy, and we have to use a curly braces. And if you are thinking you'll simply write a clock there, it's going to give you an error, and the error looks like this because it's not defined. And it's going to say, and you'll be confused, hey, it's defined, it's not accessible like this. You have to call this dot state. Remember early classes when we talked about it, how the props and state store the variables and things. So this is looking good. Now it's coming up from this dot state. Okay, that is good so far. And now what we want to define is, let's define a function there, or method, you can call it anything. And this is going to be simply a ticker. Okay, and what ticker basically will do, it will subtract what the time is coming from the properties from the new date. Okay, so it's going to simply say this dot set state, and obviously it's going to replace the things in the clock. Okay, that is why we are using the set state. Good so far. And in the pair of parentheses, it's going to simply say clock is now, we are defining a new date on the go. We don't need to store that in a variable. That's complete wastage of the variable there. And we're going to simply say this dot props and dot start. I guess I have passed it with the name of start. I think so. Yep, start there. And in case you are not aware of what this new date and date now gives you, I would again recommend you to read that blog there. Or in case you are still so much confused and haven't gone to in JavaScript details, then comment down in the section below, and I'll make a new video specially dedicated to the date. But again, date is super important. It's very useful there. Now you might be wondering that, okay, now we have a method that is changing the state, but how we are going to call this? Now we don't have a button. If we would have a button, we could simply bind this method onto something like on click event, and then we could have gone there. But I want this component to get started the time as soon as it's being loaded. And you guessed that right, we're going to use component lifecycle method, one of them method, which is component did mount. Okay, there we go. This is the method. And now you might be wondering, hey, this method is only being called one at a time, one time only during the entire loading period or everything. Do we have to refresh this again and again to actually make this clock running? And I would say no, we are going to use one of the again inbuilt method that is known as set interval there. And that is the method set interval, interval. There we go. I got a little bit confused there. And what it's going to take a time and as well as a method to call in after a particular time. So we're going to say this dot ticker, and we're going to say 1000 there for 1 millisecond. And now again, this is not going to run in itself. This is a new limitation. So you can say this dot timer equals there. Now we are not worried about the timer variable or anything. What we are doing in here is actually we are trying to run this function after a set interval of time. This is completely useless for us, but just for the syntax sakes, we are just keeping it in there. Okay, that is good. We are updating it, but we are not displaying the things in there. Now, why we are not displaying it? So let me just quickly go through because one thing that we actually left. Now we have defined the sticker method, but again, this is a common mistake, and you'll see this quite a lot. You'll be just bugging out your application quite a lot. Now, whenever you have to do this, as I told you, you have to bind this as well in the constructor. So all you have to do is this dot ticker, and very awkward error. But again, trust me, it has taken a lot of my time as well, just like it's taking your time. So all you have to do is dot bind and simply this, and everything should be good going. Notice it's not working just what we are expecting. It's just giving us a lot of numbers in there. And obviously that is not a good thing. That is not a good thing. So how we can change that? So let's go in here. Just before the return, I'll define a clock there again. And you can actually call this anything. I'll simply call this as clock. Okay, I know that was frustrating, but that is okay. So what we are going to do is we'll do some math operation, just simple stuff. So math dot round, and we're going to access this dot state dot clock, and we'll be dividing it by 1000. Okay, that makes sense because we are passing in 1000 in here, so I want just a one number to be updated. But again, it's not gonna do it because it's just calling this guy. We want it to call this guy, so I can delete this, and I think things should be good now. Okay, so this was a quick simple timer. It could have been much better if we just could have done a click element, but again, notice how many clicks you have to made in that case. So some things are need to be done with these kinds of elements. So this was a pretty good idea about how the component lifecycle methods can be used. So notice we are calling it component did mount. We are not calling component will mount because component has already mounted. And these are some trickeries that we have done to just call a set interval method and just like this. So pretty beautiful example in here that we are doing. So again, nothing big we have done in here. Again, I would highly recommend to read all of you date in case you're already aware with the JavaScript. Completely ignore my line. But again, this is a very useful method. It can give you dates, time, values, and a lot of things that you can do. Just a simple basic example. So I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial. I know the CSS is bare minimum, but notice how the CSS is expanding based on the text. I like this. This is not I'm anything doing in here or React has to do it. It's automatic there in the CSS. But again, pretty beautiful example. Very clear, very precise about state of the React component. Okay, so I hope you have enjoyed this video so far. In case you are enjoying the series, then keep forwarding and post down your questions in the Q&A section. I would love to interact with you, and I'll catch you up in the next video.